which I will do right now. All right, everybody. So people still need to turn to the discussion. Content assignment. So what I mean by essays, and I know some people have, I want to make it clear because I guess people think of essays as different things. These are essay questions, meaning I don't need you to write a giant intro and a long conclusion. What I need you to do is there's 5 questions, answer 5 questions in essay format. So number 1, period, and then the question. And I guess the first one is, let me just go to it here. Talk about the sociological perspective and discuss the importance of a global perspective. Okay. The next one, identify and discuss the 3 major paradigms. I've told you that those will be important on the test. So the conflict, symbolic interactionist, and functionalist perspectives, those are all, you'll need to talk about those. So number 1, and then write, a couple paragraphs. You have citations that have to be in text, which means, for every question, which means that you also have to have a works cited page to reference that, whether you use APA or MLA, whatever style you want to use of citations, that's up to you, but it has to be in text. We have to know where that's coming from, and that just makes your work scholarly and prepares you for writing that you're going to continue to do. There are people probably in this class that are juniors and seniors that are used to that. If you're a freshman or sophomore and you're new to that business, we're writing some essays or some essay questions out because, of course, you can use your textbook as your only source if you want. If you find something good outside, again, no Wikipedia ever, Google Scholar or something peer-reviewed that comes from the database for CSU's library. But you should be able to answer most of them with the textbook, and that's fine with me. If you have the citations, make it scholarly. Nobody is ever going to penalize you for having citations because that's where your work is coming from and shows that it's not plagiarized. Obviously, if you're talking about a theoretical paradigm and the importance of the conflict paradigm, I didn't write that, you didn't write that. We both have to cite that information, right? Even if we sort of have that knowledge offhand. So, all right. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of those is, a paragraph or 2 long. Answer the question and try and be as detailed as you can, and then submit that by Friday at midnight. I will say this. You can't always count on your connection being good. I think now more so than maybe ever before. So do me a favor, do not try and submit this business at 11:59 because we have a class of 250 people. And yes, I'll tell the truth this morning. That would have been me up the night before submitting that paper, or I guess I couldn't submit it at 11:59. I had to turn it in person. But now that it's like you could hang out until the last second to do it, that would have been me. I don't recommend that because we're not so sure that that's going to work or that Canvas isn't going to crash. And you know that you want points for that. Now, am I going to penalize you for 12:13 a.m.? Good Lord, no. I don't care enough to be online at 12:13 a.m. But when the grad assistants and myself, when we go through grading that stuff, it's going to matter that it's turned in relatively on time. If you had a small problem submitting it, that's one thing. If it's turned in the next morning, it's late. I think everything is 3 points per day late, which means that you should take time and do it correctly. If you're going to cram it in and do a poor job of it Friday night, might as well turn it in 1 day later for just 3 points missing and do it correctly. I would always rather that you do a little more and quality work rather than rush it and have it in by a deadline, and yet you're going to not get a full grade on that anyway because maybe you rushed. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so not trying to bore you, but that's basically it. APA or MLA is fine to me. These are not so formal. Also that you can include your own insight. And I have that there in the description, but include your own perspective on some of these or your own insight. This is sociology, and it might not matter what you think about a certain thing if this is calculus, and I wouldn't care about that at all myself, but with Soch, we're relating this to experiences that you have in your life. So I think that's a good thing. All right. So we've got the content tomorrow that's due. We've got the discussion today. Solution assignment number 1. Yeah, don't worry about that. The syllabus does have a couple mistakes because I would really like rushing to get across the finish line, even though I was working all summer long on stuff. Click on the syllabus on Canvas, the link on the left. It has all the dates that are already set and everything is there for you in order. So that's where I would, rely on first. Okay. All right. And I'll go take a look at that too. So check out announcements. There's our business as far as what's due. Does anybody have any questions? Anything at all? Anybody make chili yesterday or eat something unseasonably warm? Anybody get down on that? I mean, go ahead.
I'm from Texas, so I made hot cocoa. This is some crazy weather for me.
I'm from Dallas. I feel I'm very much in the same boat. I'm like, this is wild. This is way
looking
too
out
early.
my window, I was with my friend yesterday, and we were just like looking at the snowflakes, and we're like, oh, that's a big one. And we were like, what if people looked at raindrops like this? Like, to other people here, it's just like rain, but we're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
We were talking about this in class yesterday. What could we measure quantitative and qualitatively? And so quantitatively, I'm like, we could measure how many people skiing in Colorado in jeans are from Texas.
Yes.
Like, you could just interview those people as they come down the mountain and be like, Texas, yep, Arizona, thank you. Like, right? And like, get all those states out of the way. That's hilarious. Yeah, so you making chili, maybe that's my response. For you, it's embracing the cold with some hot cocoa. That's hilarious. Yeah.
Some of the people in the complex next to us were playing Christmas music like all night, so that was pretty funny too.
Okay, full disclosure, as we're covering the rows of tomatoes in the garden, both my boys, so my oldest son Storm got his phone out, and the first song was Christmas Vacation, and all of a sudden, and then it was like he did a Christmas playlist before the snow while we were prepping for it, and because you can put Christmas lights down the rows of tomatoes and help keep them from frosting that way. The little Christmas lights, as long as they're not LED, 90% of the light that they put out is in the form of heat and not light. So it's not a lot of heat, but people do that with like fruit trees and things like that in Florida and places like that get a quick freeze or something on the borderline. So yeah, my kids turned it into a Christmas party as well. So I'm just going to embrace that for like 48 hours. And then when it's 76 and 80 on Saturday or Friday or whatever it is, then it's back to business as usual, because it looks like it's going to be in the 80s and just be really gorgeous past this. So anyway, great. Okay. Now that we have those things out of the way, and look, if we actually get to meet as a class, I'm happy for you chiming in ways like that. I mean, really, just meeting on our computers, I can't just consistently talking about deadlines and not, get the fun part as well too. So, all right.
Wait, where were you? That Christmas music actually might have been me.
No, me.
I live in the.
Oh, right.
I live in the Stadium Apartments. I don't know where you are.
Oh, I'm in Braden, so it's kind of close to there, but you probably couldn't hear it from there.
All right.
No, the people who were playing it were from the Standard, which is the apartment complex next to us, and we have a couple rowdy neighbors over there, so it was not surprising that they were blaring Christmas music all night.
I got you.
Rowdy, like, getting their party on with some Christmas music, some Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
Would you turn that Bing Crosby down? All right. My boys also had a really long discussion about why Christmas songs and Christmas movies have continued to get worse and worse and worse. They were really pointing to Elf as the last solid good Christmas classic. Maybe there's been something since then, but anyway. All right, we'll move on since it's not technically tis the season. Tis not the season. Let's move back on to our questions, and we'll look at the questions about quantitative and qualitative. Now, every semester, I give in class in person what is called the slow clap of the universe. That doesn't mean that answers to questions are wrong necessarily. It just means that sometimes things in the universe are so obvious that I have to give them the slow clap. All right, so now that you know what the slow clap is, I would like to introduce it with the first answer from our quantitative question. What kind of things could we measure or study with quantitative approach? All right, I want to say that answer number 1 was statistics and answer number 2 was numbers. I do believe that deserves the slow clap of the universe. What kind of things could we measure with numbers? Numbers? Anyway, good answers, but I'm looking for like what actual kinds of things could we number, and did I say qualitative or quantitative now? Quantitative, yes. What kind of things can we measure with numerical measurements? Because some things, because remember, we're measuring sociological behavior in the real world. Some things are really easy to measure, right? And some things are really difficult. So that's why we're using both quantitative and qualitative things, right? Okay, so let me look back at the list and I will read some of these off. People. I know we've only been in class answering questions for like a week and a half. I'm gonna get on to some good ones here. Poverty, yes. Polls, surveys. Okay, let's get to some other things. Unemployment rates, there we go. Restaurants, sure. With quantitative data, you could do something interesting like how many people consider Olive Garden fast food, right? And then we would look, because I had that question later, because we're going to talk about food in our food project. Then I could say how many people consider McDonald's fast food, and I would say 100% of people or 99% of people that we measured said fast food, McDonald's definitely was, but why did only 50% of people say that Olive Garden is fast food? You see what I'm saying? So sure, we could measure some attitudes even, things that might seem like qualitative things, but with numerical measurements for sure. Let's look at this. Educational achievement, yes. COVID-19, sure, you could measure all sorts of things statistically about this piece right here. Social behavior, yes, of course, but what social behavior? Teen pregnancy, race and gender, absolutely. Relationships, income, yes. Votes, I mean, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Quantitatively, good. And then, see, like, let's take something like that, right? Like, who are you voting for? We do a poll and come out and we get the numbers. But then we talk about like voter enthusiasm. Like, what is that, right? So obviously one thing is quantitative numbers. And then how enthusiastic are you about the person you're voting for? I mean, your enthusiasm doesn't have to be off the charts to win an election by a crushable amount, but it is at least a measure of something different than just numbers. So I do like, you know, that's a good way that we could look at something quantitatively and qualitatively. Race, behavior, yeah. So something with race might be how many scholarships for college are based on race alone. And that would be, and that number is 0.025 of 1%. So I know that people talk about affirmative action. Really, we don't implement affirmative action in any meaningful way across the board. The perception of it and the emotionally sort of charged thing around it might be that. But if we really look at the numbers, only 0.025, which is 0.25% of all college admissions based on race alone. So it starts to paint a different picture when we talk about and have those statistics available. Then we can start to ask some qualitative questions. Does it feel safe on campus if you're a person of color? And why or why not, right? So that we've got some quantitative numbers and questions that we can ask. And then we can also have ways to measure things. And a qualitative way is just giving us that description, that account of people's lives. Colorado. All right. Materialism. The amount of users today on Snapchat. Sure, you could look at that. Yep. You could look at dating statistics. And you could say how many people, how has dating changed since COVID-19? Are people meeting more in person, or are they truly now meeting more from a distance online? Like, is that just a perception that people would be easier to meet online? Is that really the truth? What the heck does Tinder have to do with the world today? I'm gonna avoid that one today. Let's look at qualitative. Okay, so there's a lot of things here. Age, demographic, police, crime statistics. Yeah, crime statistics are really important. And we have to understand that statistics are important. And that's why, and we do talk about that in this chapter, research and research integrity is important because people will try and bend statistics. And I have a good friend that teaches stats here, Ben, at the school, and he is amazing. He teaches a class that a lot of people don't really like, but it is important to know how statistics are used because those get manipulated so frequently, right? Good. Let's look at qualitative. Now, quantitative, Numerical measurements, easier to do if you've watched the lecture in a laboratory or a controlled setting. We don't have that necessarily this semester. We could do some quantitative stuff though for the food project. Maybe that's a food survey, finding out what people eat, why, things like that. So anyway, there are ways that we can look at things and you can do that research even though it's quantitative this semester, but we also don't have the controlled setting, the time, or the lab type of space necessarily to do that. So let's look at qualitative. Qualitative, much different, right? All right. So we have 118 people responding. What kind of things could we measure with a qualitative approach? Love. Okay. Let's talk about that, right? I mean, that's exactly, and I do use that example in the lecture, but that's a perfect example, right? Like, if I were to ask you to measure love in a quantitative way, how would I do that? I mean, I've been married 19 years. I get 5 hugs and 3 kisses a day. I don't like, is there a way to measure love in a quantitative way? Maybe. But in a qualitative way, a sociologist asking for that data becomes really interesting. So like, what is love to you? Like, okay, so how do you decide if you're going to date somebody? I'm opening this up, this question right now. What's a characteristic that you look for, right? Because we're talking qualitatively, right? What's a characteristic that you look for if you're going to date somebody? And you don't even know.
Honesty, most likely.
What'd you say?
Honesty.
All right, honesty. What else? Intelligence. Respect. Is that what you said? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, respect. Loyalty in all caps. Loyalty. A personality. But that's kind of vague, right? Like if you're going to date somebody, every human being walking around, well, most human beings walking around have a personality, right? Chivalry. Ooh, okay, chivalry. All right. Sense of humor, devotion, kindness, and patience. I'm assuming that is noise. Noise. Thank you. As I have my teenagers here in the house to guide me through all that. It wasn't this class. Okay, I'm going to divert for 1 second. Do you know what Rickrolling is? Okay, now everybody on my screen, 5 pages deep, should shake their head because you are of this age group, right? And that's like an old thing, right? Storm tells me that's like a 2008 thing, okay? But that it still exists, right? Okay, so I just found out about Rickrolling the other day, okay? So I see something that says, new evidence against Carol Baskin. And so I'm like, oh yeah, gonna get some evidence against Carol Baskin. Click, never gonna get you down. Never. Right? And Storm, who's got school in the house with me, is downstairs and he pops his head up his door and he's like, you just got rickrolled. And as a sociologist, I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, oh, that was kind of 2008, bro. And I'm like, okay, so back it up. What is that? Anyway, so once I found out what getting rickrolled was, I believe I worked it at the very end of my Social 220 lecture. And normally the lectures end with that elevator music, and it did. And then I rickrolled my whole class. Booyah! So anyway, even though I'm years late, and that's probably not much of an accomplishment, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Because I know there's like 150 people that were like, if they made it all the way to the end of the video anyway. Okay, so there's like 75 people. So maybe I got half my class, but I'm willing to do that. All right. So look at these things. It's so interesting, right? It's like, how in the world do you decide who you might date? You don't have any numerical measurements. So the things that you're looking at, like that you might even be interested in somebody or that would point you in that direction, are oftentimes these qualitative types of things. Okay, so let's look at, that was just the first one, love. Eye color, not so much, but maybe the repercussion of eye color. Stress. Good, absolutely. Yeah, what makes you feel stressed? How college students are during COVID. Climate. Climate are a lot of things that might be numerical, but on the other side, you know, do you feel safe? Like with what's happening with your environment? or not, or why? Or, oh, how about this qualitative question? Describe your relationship with the natural world. I mean, I'm asking a qualitative question when we're going to look at our food project today real quick. I'm going to introduce that paper before we all split here. What is your relationship with food? So go ahead right now, whether you type it out or whether you tell us. Question to you, what is your relationship with food? Maybe nobody's asked you that question before.
I love food.
All right, love.
Love it.
Love it, love it. There's more than love. What else you got? Who's got an it's complicated?
I work in a restaurant downtown, so I can kind of get sick of food pretty quick sometimes.
I mean,
especially if I'm busing.
Yeah, and let's talk for a minute, since we are talking about servers, let's talk about this. If you go out and eat at a restaurant, you tip 20%, right? Do you know this? I know that you know of this, but you should know that that's not a question. You don't get an option. Like, okay, so rewind me 20 years ago with my partner, two young 20-year-old hippies, holes in our clothes, hair down, way down my back. Whenever we would go into a restaurant, I'd say about half the time we'd get some pretty rotten service. But because we had both served before, did I ever leave a tip less than 20%? Nope. And when I got treated really poorly, I tip 25 just to make a point. So remember, for all the servers out there and anybody who thinks they can go out and serve and then just pick a number, you can't. It's 20%. All right. And if you can still eat the food if you work at a restaurant after a while working there, that's pretty impressive. All right. Love it. It's been complicated for many years. Food and culture are very connected. Complicated. Mine is complicated. Love food. Gets expensive fast. Number one fan. Number one fan. I've been eating ramen for the last 3 weeks. Hey, I told y'all about Martha Gooch, didn't I? Yeah, Gooch. That is the off-brand of mac and cheese that I could afford in college for 19 cents a box. The Gooch. That's right. I know. That's why I try and let you have your textbooks used or like give some options to people, because who knows, right? Cooking is stress relief. Yeah. 20% the bare minimum. Reward for good service. Yes. All right. What are some answers? Go ahead and unmute your mic. Give an answer. What's your relationship with food?
It really just is kind of to keep us alive, in my opinion. So it doesn't matter what you eat as long as it keeps you alive.
Okay. And so there's one end of the spectrum, right? I would say, like, you got to eat. And that's really why we're doing this project, because I wanted to find a project that was interesting or applicable to everybody, not just like what would necessarily be interesting to your 47-year-old professor, right? So at least we all eat. So I pay attention to the amount of sugar in the food I eat. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we all have a relationship with food, even if we don't think about it, okay? And I guess if I were to say, what is my relationship with food 20 years ago in college, that would be whatever was in front of me at 1 p.m., noon, 2 a.m. It didn't matter. And luckily, 20 years ago, fast food wasn't quite as gross and non-food as it is now, which is, it's pushed past the point of no return. But hopefully we can change that. All right, so I'm going to switch gears now. And I'm going to introduce the food project. Now, the food project I don't think is due, and we'll look here till, I want to say November 2nd, but let me go back to assignments and just make sure for everybody. Yep, November 2nd, Food Matters. And this is a paper that has 3 different components. Now, I'll go and make a video about this with a bit of a PowerPoint that I have that shows some examples from past classes so that you get a little bit of an idea of what I'm looking for format-wise. But I'm going to introduce it now because, again, if you're like me, we're already 3 weeks into the semester. We're already 3 weeks into the semester. That's 2020 right there. And that moves fast. So even though this is November 2nd, and it seems like there's maybe a month and a half left, next thing you know, it's going to be 4 weeks. Next thing you know, it's going to be 2 weeks. So I want you to feel comfortable with this project. So let me explain it just real briefly. Then you can go and look at the assignment later. I'll do a video about it, and at least you'll have a little bit better idea. Does that sound good? All right. So this is nothing that's due today, or excuse me, tomorrow or Friday. This is the big project. So it's worth 150 points, which means it's worth 1.5 exams. So you want to do well on this, and you have plenty of time to do it, and you have help from the Writing Center, you have help from the GTAs, and it's a paper that in the third section, I let you pick the part about it that's interesting to you, okay? I always want to build that into assignments so that you can relate in some way, because this is, again, sociology I feel is a bit different. Okay, let me pull it up again. So section 1 is make a list of 10 foods that you eat that have lists of ingredients, and then the organic version or the conventional version. So basically, ragu spaghetti sauce, not organic, ingredients. Then the organic version of that, ingredients. And you do that for 10 different foods, box of mac and cheese, granola bar, and you put the list side by side. That's easy. You can do that now. This is just basic data collection. You can go online. You might even be able to find these products online instead of going to the grocery store and taking pictures of the labels, so that you could just copy and paste. I mean, copy and paste is a friend to all children. All right. So is Gamera. Nobody knows what Gamera is, but if somebody does know what Gamera is, you let me know, because I'd be impressed, even with 131 people in here. All right. So then section 1, you do the comparisons. Then you pick out 10 of those specific ingredients. Now it might be dimethylpexylflossylflotylfladium, and it turns out to be salt. So you see what I'm saying? Some ingredients that seem interesting might be like 3 or 4 syllables, but could just be something simple. High fructose corn syrup, and then you write a little sentence about it with the citation. That's section 1. You do some ingredient listing, and you do 10 specific ingredients. Section 2, then you move on, and it's 2 single-spaced pages, section 2, and you are doing research on conventionally grown foods, GMO foods, and organically raised foods, okay? So the idea here is that I want you to look at a bit of agriculture, not just organic foods are better, bruh, or GMO foods are totally safe for you, man. Not that. I want to look at things like, how is it grown? Why does that matter? What's that mean to your health of your bodies? What's it mean to the health of the environment? I mean, why is somebody like, I think it's General Mills. They do all the breakfast cereals. They have made a commitment a while back to change, I think, to all organic farming practices, at least for their wheat. And now think about that. If you go buy organic cereal, that's a few boxes. If they do it and they have literally millions of acres to grow that on, what kind of impact does that have? Positive for the environment, likely, or negative, depending. Okay, so you're going to be looking for section 2 at how are foods raised? How are they grown, and what's that look like? And then the last 2 pages, okay, would be examine and research food from some type of cultural perspective or something that you're interested in. And because it's only 2 pages, just like the section 2, it's going to be fairly short. Obesity in America is not going to get it done because that's too huge. So maybe you could look at obesity rates. No, I don't even want you to do obese. Don't do anything with that, okay? Maybe look at veganism or veganism and athletes. Or somebody got so down there the other day, they were like, what about veganism and honey? And I'm like, what about it? And they're like, well, how can you ethically gather honey from bees if you're going to be a vegan? All sorts of questions, right? And then I said, well, I have 120 chickens. They roam over 2 acres. They're going to lay eggs every single day. Is it irresponsible of me if they're doing that anyway and they're not on a factory farm to collect the eggs so that they don't rot, so that the chickens don't eat rotten eggs, or so that something doesn't come up the coop? So you could look at chicken farming, right? Chicken people. You could look at community shared agriculture. I think the first CSA in the United States was Happy Hearts Farms just off Elizabeth. And Dennis and Bailey, a couple old fantastic farmer hippies. They're awesome. You could interview people who do CSA or have a share in a CSA. Why is it important that people get food locally? What about organic gardens for schools? We got an organic garden put in at Olander Elementary. Be specific. I want to do organic gardens in the Poudre School District. Here's how I would do it. Here's what program might look like. Here's how I get the support for it. I don't know, whatever. So anything how about a weightlifting and eating habits of people that are putting on weight, and then, kind of in an extreme way sometimes people could think, and then burning that, or how about eating disorders? around a specific subculture like weightlifters. I don't know. So that's the basic project. 3 different sections. 2 of the sections have 2 pages of writing, so 4 pages single spaced of writing and some listing. It's a decent sized thing of work, but I think it's an interesting paper. Am I doing it to change your mind? No. Some people do this food project and they're like, I'm never eating fast food again. And some people are like, can't wait to go to McDonald's. I'm there right now. Like, that doesn't matter to me. Just so that you examine your relationship with food from a sociological perspective. Because I think that we've got farther and farther and farther away from that in our culture. And so why not take a look at something that's not something that everybody looks at all the time? Questions about the food project, or more importantly, before we leave today, does anybody have an idea of like a section 3 that they might do? Something interesting about food or eating restrictions or dietary stuff or whatever that might be, that they want to bounce off me, or if you have an idea.
I was thinking about doing escargot and how people in other countries like to eat snails.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I don't know why my 15-year-old told me the other day that rich people eat the weirdest things. And I said, like, caviar? And he said, yeah. And I said, what do you know about that? And he's like, I don't. It just sounds weird. And I don't think people that aren't wealthy eat it. So, yes, it could be something like that.
Caviar is
Food and weight cutting in boxing MMA. Yeah, that's a really good one. What is that? Whoever just said that, Ben, what's that? What is that? What's food and weight cutting?
Yeah, so basically, these boxers and MMA fighters try to cut as much weight as they can before fights to reach whatever weight they're fighting in. And it's really interesting to see kind of how they do it. A lot of it is just water weight, but I know a lot of them go through some pretty extreme diets to get whatever weight they want to get at.
Good. Absolutely. It's, the thing that I want you to be interested in, it's due November 2nd. The thing that I think is interesting about anything, like when we answer questions in class, if 98% of people answer one way and there's just a little bit the other way, that's the part as a sociologist that makes me go, right? So if there's some interesting behavior or some question you have about food or practices around it, that might be like keying you off or keying you into the fact that that might be a really interesting idea. And not all those things are like disorders. I mean, the amount of triathletes and really high functioning super athletes that are doing veganism in a way. Now look at this. How about veganism, like processed veganism? See, my partner works at Vitamin Cottage. They're a natural grocery store. A ton of vegans that come in there that are eating almost nothing but processed foods that are like other foods. Or then there's like hardcore veganism, which is like nuts and berries and whole foods and things that are actually those ingredients themselves. So like, what's that like? She had somebody come in the store 3 months ago and tell her that that they were a level 5 vegan. And Julie's like, what's that? And I was like, is that like a level 5 wizard in Dungeons and Dragons? Lucky I wasn't working there at that time. Anyway, and she said, what is that? And he's like, oh, I basically can't eat anything with a shadow. But he was searching for one of those impossible burgers, which if you look at how those burgers are made, you could make a case that those are every bit as dangerous and unhealthy as a burger because of I think even the yeast is genetically modified. So looking at those things, and he said, well, yeah, but I want you to sell the one kind of burgers that really smell like meat cooking. And Julie was like, wait, doesn't that gross you out? You're a vegan. Like, so to me, the interesting part in that would be like people who've decided upon veganism seeking out food that's like dead animals. As a sociologist, you got me, right? I want to know. And there might be all sorts of good reasons for that. I'm not making fun of it. I just want to know, because people approach veganism or eating organic or not, like everybody approaches that differently. So to me, could be some interesting data there. I'm a level 10 wizard. All right. So love the comments. All right. Anybody else? An idea that maybe you might have to wonder if it would work for this paper before we go? Because somebody, like I described it, somebody was like, oh, hey, I wonder if that's good. I'll help you process that right now. Or say yes or no. Anybody? Why are so many people lactose intolerant? Differences in culture between staple foods? Sure. And like I said, obesity and eating disorders, look, it's important that we wrap our heads around that. But I mean, we know a lot about that, you know? Lab grown meat. There you go. There you go. Lab grown meat, or lab grow kind of meat, or not meat. You know, I mean, the idea behind these Impossible Burgers is still, even if the burger itself, right, is made with horrible ingredients that might not be good for you, it still doesn't take 2,000 liters of water for a pound of it, like beef, right? So obviously there's all sorts of components from this, not one side. That's why I love Soch. It's not like conservative or liberal. It's just so many sides. If you have been told that you are only one of two things, someone's done you a great disservice, because we're obviously many more than that, or much more than that as humans. Impacts of the keto diet. Sure. Racism in food media. What does that even mean? I don't know, but there could be something there, because I know that there's all sorts of like food advertising stuff that targets people who identify with the gender female. And usually it's really weird. Like, I'm alone tonight with a quart of ice cream and just the two of us are going to get on down. And, you know, like, it's really the way that they present some of that stuff for women, or binge eating or things like that, can be really purposeful and completely unhealthy and off the charts. So I'm sure that there's racism in food media and food deserts. If you don't know what a food desert is, there's some racism right there. And that's, how far are you from a grocery store? Not like a 7-Eleven that charges 3 times as much for a half a thing of milk, or some bars or some Doritos, but an actual grocery store. So you could look at race and access. Somebody gonna say something? No? Had your mic on for a sec. I technically live in a food. Correlations between gerrymandering and food deserts? Yeah, I mean, awesome. Good. Seasonal foods and price gouging? Sure. I mean, so many things I think that you could do. So let's just say, come up with an idea that is far more interesting and more specific. Celiacs disease in the food industry. Yeah, it's important when we look at things like celiacs and lactose intolerant and gluten intolerance. Remind me to get back to that in 1 second. Because some people don't make food. Some people make food decisions like my wife and I. This is what I want to eat. I want to go organic. I want to lose weight. Some people are making food decisions because they have no other choice with a broken food system and how their body has reacted from it, right? So did you know that Boston Terriers were gluten intolerant? I just want to see your faces now. Yes. Now, if you're like me, and maybe I'm going to call Tyler out, Tyler Peel. If you're like, have that same look on your face that Tyler and I might have, you might be saying to yourself, a gluten intolerant dog? That's ridiculous. So when we got a little Boston Terrier a year ago, after about 6 months, when we read that, same with IBS, doesn't surprise me. I decided just to give the dog a big piece of crust one night when we had pizza night at our house, and then flipped her over a couple hours later to rub her tummy, and she had like 1,000 red dots all over her. So yes, Boston Terriers can be gluten intolerant, and that's actually a thing. For as skeptical as I will tell you I was, and the experiment that I ran. All right, looks like it's lunchtime for my dude. Oh yeah, we're gonna watch Dive. No, this is the 100. We're not gonna watch Dive, but that is a great documentary for food waste if you do get into that. All right, if you have any more questions, please reach out and email me. And yeah, be good people and do good things. Keep wearing your masks when you're out. Keep each other healthy, and take care, everybody. All right, I will release a study guide this weekend. It's over chapters 1, 2, and 3, so you should be busy enough reading the chapter and seeing where my slides intersect for some really big terms and concepts that you know we're going to have. Start with the stuff that you're also writing about for content, because you're going to need to know those paradigms and things like that, okay? Can you bring notes on the exam? Can we use notes on the exam? It's a 50-minute or an hour timed 50-question test. It is not proctored. But if you don't go into that scenario having information ready, it's not going to help you all that much if you have your text. So I will give you study guide stuff this weekend and tell you more information about that as it goes on. Peace, everybody. Be good people and do good things. And remember, never gonna let you down, never gonna pick you down, never gonna turn you around and desert you. Woo.